John, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Matt. This looks like the audio version of Playboy After Night here.
It kind of is. It's resembles many other shows in that respect. Well, we're here at Shiny Eyes Studio, so I want to give a shout out to our friends at Shiny Eyes for hosting us and letting us sit on this lovely couch and be in this environment. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about, well, we're going to talk a lot about one mic. We're going to do a deep dive into something that you created that I think is really kind of unique, especially in the day and age of Atmos. It also speaks to committing early on and really getting it right at the recording rather than trying to fix it later on in a mix or do overdubs or anything like that. It's an interesting thing. Obviously, for you audience, links will be in the show notes. You can go check everything out that we're going to be talking about, and we'll probably be referencing some things that we'll share in the video version. So let's have you describe what is one mic for the audience that doesn't know.
Well, the challenge that I sort of posed on myself was to record a band, you know, a guitar, bass, drums, actually two guitars, bass, and drums, a couple of singers around one stereo microphone. The goal was for it to sound like a recording that was done as a multi-track. Mm-hmm. That was the goal. Can that be done? It was mostly because I had an R88 by AEA, the stereo ribbon microphone, and I was trying to think of ways I could use it besides, you know, a room mic or a drum overhead or the other ways people use stereo microphones. And I thought, maybe I could record an entire band around just this one microphone. Well, could I do it? I didn't know if I could or not. So I was working with a band at 25th Street in Oakland, really beautiful studio you're familiar with. And at some point during the later stage of the recordings, I said to them, hey, you guys, would you be interested in like gathering around this microphone and let me see if I can record what we're doing today with just the one microphone? And they thought I was crazy, of course, but they were cooperative. And I figured if the whole thing went south, I'd just buy them some beer and pizza and all would be forgiven. I assembled them around the microphone. And because the R88 is a stereo ribbon, it acts in Bloomline configuration, which gives you a 90-degree stereo spread in the front of the microphone and a 90-degree spread, a stereo spread on the back of the microphone, giving you more real estate, if you will, to record a band around one microphone than if you just had one stereo microphone. One stereo mic or two microphones acting as stereo will give you just one 90-degree plane to work within.
Right.
But the beauty of a ribbon microphone is you have both sides of the microphone are now active because it is a ribbon. And the beauty of a ribbon is the frequency response of both sides of that ribbon are identical. So there's no compromise to working on the back side of the microphone. It sounds identical to the front side of the microphone.
In a condenser situation that is figure of eight, the back side would have sonic compromises, is that?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it would be a compromise. I would just say my experience with stereo condenser microphones, particularly of the vintage variety, the back side of the microphone will sound different than the front side. Sometimes they sound better. You know, I've worked in studios where they'll say, well, if you're going to use that in bidirectional, use the backside. It's like, okay, because somebody had discovered that the backside has more top end or more, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. We don't know. But the beauty of a ribbon, of course, is that it isn't two capsules.
Yeah. And in this case at 25th Street, what did you discover in that moment of experimentation?
I put the microphone in the middle of the room, and then I just did what seemed logical to me. Put the drummer on one side in front of the microphone, maybe 10 feet away, and then put the guitar amplifiers out to the side, like around 45 degrees, but I put them on the opposite side of the microphone so I could work with the guitar sounds, how close they were going to be to the mic, and what their stereo spread was, right, on that side of the microphone. And then on the other side where the drums were, I put the lead singer who was playing acoustic guitar. So I had a pedal steel on one side, electric guitar on the other side, and a lead singer with an acoustic guitar in the middle, and the drummer behind him. And then of course a bass. I put the bass amp right in front of the kick drum, right? Because I figured the bass and the kick drum needed to be balanced like you would if you were mixing, right? So I asked the drummer, hit the bass drum hard like you're going to play it, and I went over and adjusted the bass amp, so I got a marriage between the sound of the bass guitar amp and the kick drum. So kind of like pre-mixed it, if you will, but it's still like 8-10 feet away.
And getting it centered between the two capsules.
Yes, I put it between the two capsules. Now, having said that, of course, the room now becomes like a big deal on how it's going to react, particularly to bottom end. If one side of the studio is more absorbent, then the bass guitar and the kick drum will tend to move to the other side in the stereo field, right? Because one side's being absorbed. In a sense, it would be like turning it down. So you start to, as I did more and more of these recordings, I started becoming much more sensitive to the acoustics of a room and how they are going to affect the ultimate recording. But the recording that we're speaking of now was the first one, and I wasn't aware of any of that stuff.
This was the inaugural recording at 25th, where you had never tried this on this level before.
Yeah. Never tried it before. I just said, well, here, sit in front of the microphone, play acoustic guitar. I had him about a foot or so away because I wanted his voice to sound close like it would in a conventional recording. I had the guitar amps out 5, 6, 8 feet. I hadn't really figured out how far away they need to be to make them sound natural and still get a nice stereo left-right spread of the two, the steel, it was a steel guitar, a pedal steel, and electric guitar, and then the acoustic in the center. That's how I would have mixed it in a multi-track situation. And again, I'm trying to recreate a multi-track sound with one microphone, right? We've all taken microphones and recorded band rehearsals, right? You take a cassette recorder or whatever it was back in the day, you would put a microphone in a room, or an iPhone today, and the band would play, and it would be, you could hear what everyone's kind of playing, but it didn't sound like a record, right? So I didn't know if this was going to sound like that, or if I could actually refine it to a point where ideally somebody wouldn't know the difference. I think fool is probably the wrong word. What I wanted to do is try to recreate the sound of a multi-track recording, but by using one microphone and a lot of, recording technique that I'd learned over all the years. If I had never been a recording engineer for 40 years, I don't know if I could have pulled this off.
What's funny is to hear you talk about this in this way is that I've seen comments on some of the videos where people say there's no way this is just that one microphone, and having, and we'll come back to this at another point in the conversation, but having worked with you and done this before with you, I can attest to how shocking it is to get the placement just right, to make it really come across.
And when, and we'll talk about this later probably, when we did the one mic where you helped me with, that was probably number 34, 35. So I had done it quite a few times by the time you joined me. So you got a really refined version of it. Believe me, the first handful of them were trial and error would be the way I describe it, because it really required a lot of patience and time. And the artists and the bands that I worked with, particularly early on, they were great. They were very, they were actually kind of excited about being able to do that, to be able to perform their songs in one complete take. I got a lot of encouragement early on from a lot of the artists I work with to carry on and refine it. Where I don't know if I was just doing it for me, and they were coming into the control room and listening to it and going, well, yeah, that's interesting, that's cool, but we're not into it. Then I probably would have stopped after 3 or 4 of these things. I would not have continued with them. But I was mostly being encouraged by the artists themselves. But getting back to, because it's kind of important about whether or not people would believe whether or not it was going to be a believable presentation of this guy isn't really doing this with one mic. There must be DIs running. There's something going on here. It can't possibly be done. I decided, even on the very first recording I did, the one we were speaking of, to just take my iPhone out and walk around and video the band while they're performing the entire song around the one microphone. So I just walked around and I shot this video, and it's on my YouTube channel. I can't remember what it's called. It might have been called The First Experiment or something like that. So it's actually there. You can see it. I wanted to document it because I needed to know where these people were sitting around this microphone on this particular day, in case I wanted to try to recreate it. It was mostly for me.
Yeah, it's kind of a plotting. It would the old Beatles equivalent would be they'd just write it down. They'd make a little chart or something.
Exactly. My goal wasn't to prove to the world that I actually did it, because at that time I didn't even know if this was sonically going to work at all. I just didn't. So I had the band run through it 3 or 4 times, and then I had them come into the control room, and I didn't know what their reaction was going to be to it. And I played it for them, and they got really excited. They said, wow, this is really cool. Hey, can I go back out and turn maybe the reverb on my guitar up a little bit? And then the drummer goes, you know what, I'm gonna switch to some different sticks, and I'm gonna do this and put something in my kick drum. And the bass player says, I'm gonna roll. They all got involved with the recreation of it. And I said, well, this is good, because you guys are actually mixing this recording right now in real time as we record it. This is the mix. This is what people are ultimately going to hear.
And in this day and age, it shifts all the responsibility back to the musicians, because let's face it, in the past, this one mic thing, while not to the degree that you're doing it now, to a lesser degree, that was how things were done in much earlier recordings.
Yeah, as far back as the 30s.
So it puts the responsibility, the onus of the mix on the musician, and it forces them to balance in the room, and therefore hear the direct result. And it really yields a shockingly natural but refined sound at the same time.
Yeah, I think they inherently know that something comes of the process that is, how can I put this, been in a way taken away from them. When bands go into studios, I mean, really since the 60s, maybe once we got into multi-track recording, a lot of the balancing was removed from their responsibility, because once you start close miking everything, it was left up to an engineer and or producer to make the final call, the final decision on what, this record was going to sound like. They lost control of that. It's very interesting in modern times to have a band come in and set up around one microphone and be given back all that power instantaneously, and how often disconcerting it can be. And how for certain members of bands, depending on their experiences in recording, how well they adapt to it. It's kind of like throwing a fish in water. They suddenly realize that, wow, I can actually influence this recording while I'm recording it.
What a concept.
Yeah, what a concept. Because modern recording, there's this, Pro Tools safety net, if you will, where anything you do, anything you play can be fixed, corrected, replaced at a later date.
Yeah.
And musicians, when they walk into a studio today, even if they swear that they're all going to go in and cut this track live, in the back of everyone's minds, because this is how they've been raised, they know that they can replace their part, next Friday, right? They know inherently that if they make a mistake, not a problem. That's not to say that they don't go in and really try and really work at trying to get it in one take, but it's not really a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal, but it isn't a big deal for them.
And their choice of dynamics is also taken away, because they don't have to balance in the room per se,
right,
in many situations.
Yeah, the biggest problem with doing the one mics on a musicianship level are the drummers. They come in, they put headphones on, they often have their own mix.
Mm-hmm.
Their sense of balance in the room against the band and their individual instruments, cymbals, or how hard they might hit a tom, it's been completely compromised by headphone systems and them mixing it themselves. Obviously, if they're sitting there with headphones on and their mixer, they've chosen to turn the snare drum up really loud, they're probably not hitting it all that hard, or vice versa, or any of the way they might mix themselves, particularly cymbals. If you go look at a drummer's mixer, you'll notice that the overheads aren't even probably on.
Right.
Right? In a one mic process, the drummer's balance in the room, how hard he hits each individual piece, becomes absolutely paramount to whether or not this is going to be a successful recording or not.
The room plays a huge, huge factor as well. Yeah. What have you learned about that aspect of it?
The first handful of recordings I did at 25th Street. And honestly, that room is so beautifully balanced. That's not to say that there are parts of the room that resonate differently and have a different sort of character to them. When you're recording a band in a multi-track environment and you might have a room mic up, you may be partially aware of that. And of course, most of the time when you go into a studio that you've never been in before, the assistant engineer might say, well, we usually put the drums over there. And that's basically, some good advice, because that's where the studio and the people that have come in and out for years have learned that this is where they get the best results. Well, we don't really know that for sure. We just take their advice and do that. But in the one mic process, it's not just the drums in that part of the room, it's the entire band in the room. So yeah, we could put the drums there, but what about everybody else? And then I have, and we can get to this in a minute, about the whole video aspect of what I'm doing.
Right.
So that the room becomes absolutely a band member, if you will. Its say on the proceedings, its say on the final outcome is profound. So if you attempt to do one of these one mic recordings in the fashion that I do it in, the room is going to be your friend or it's going to be your enemy.
And would you say that the tempo of the song coupled with the room plays a factor? Because if you have a cavernous big room and the song is slow and there's room for when you hit that kick drum and it resonates, that's fine. But if you have a fast rock song that has a lot of activity on the drums, there's some considerations there.
Absolutely, and I think that those considerations I applied from my own personal experience of being an engineer for 40 years. The faster the song, the tighter the environment almost needs to be in order to get the kind of articulation you're looking for. So I wouldn't advise doing up-tempo, loud rock track in a big noisy room for a one mic. I wouldn't advise it unless you're trying to create a particular effect from that environment. And I can give you an example of it with a recording I did at Sun Studio in Memphis, which is a pretty live room that Sam Phillips designed himself with. I think originally he was using, egg crates.
Egg cartons.
Yeah, egg cartons, stuck on the wall, and that's not what they have now. Now what they have there is those squares with the white, what do they call them? Acoustic tiles. The ones with the holes in them.
Those old school acoustic tiles.
Well, yeah, the ones that you would see maybe in your high school on the ceiling.
Right.
That's kind of what's there now. So it's a pretty lively room, and I brought a rockabilly act in there. Now, a rockabilly act in that room is really appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very ambient, and it's very noisy, and it's rather wild sounding. So in that sense, it was appropriate.
Because if you take a rockabilly band and put them in a very a tight sounding room with a lot of acoustic absorption, mid-high frequency absorption, it's going to rob a lot of the energy from that band. So I would assume that a place like that would augment that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that particular act in that particular studio was because it was a Sam Phillips production originally, he used slap echo on everything, right? So while I was there, I learned what the milliseconds were that Sam Phillips used on his slap echoes. So when I went to do the mastering for this particular act that I did there, I added that echo in. So not only do we have this crazy wild ambient atmosphere that the room is generating, but I also added a slap echo to it to give it a little bit of that early rockabilly Sam Phillips vibe to it. So I kind of like went one step farther with it.
So let's for a moment just step through. We have a microphone connected to a preamp, connected to a converter, going into Pro Tools.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then when you mix, I think this is where there's been some questions. You take that stereo file, and is it accurate to say that on occasion you add reverb to that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you do any kind of mid-side processing on the stereo file to help?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, on the send to the reverb.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't ever needed to use an MS or mid-side processing on the recording itself. I've always been able to dial in the stereo spread of the say the two guitar amplifiers or whatever I want. I've been really, really, I guess, lucky to be able to get that right.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never needed to either pull them out farther or push them in. There was one occasion where I was doing, who was it? It was Essence, and I was at 25th Street, and she has a very soft voice. And they came in and they started working on one of her songs, and the band was just overpowering her voice. And I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? Now in a multi-track situation, this isn't a problem, but suddenly I'm faced with, wow, this, I don't want to have to go out there and say, hey, can we do something else that that you sing louder on? Because it was a really beautiful song. It was a song I had picked. And, I was getting a bit nervous about it. So I said, well, can you move up? Can you move up? Can you move up? And, I put a pop screen on the microphone. I got her up really, really close, uncomfortably close, really. So the start of the song, she's almost, I don't want to say she's whispering, but she's singing very, very quietly. And, it sounded really good. In the control room, I thought, okay, as long as you can sing, do it there like this, and we get the band kind of down a bit, this is going to work. So we did the whole thing, got the recording done. Then I bring it home, and it's time to do, sort of the mastering process that I have to do, and then sync it to video. And I brought it up, and I went, man, her voice just isn't loud enough. I really, really, again, trying to make it sound like a multi-track recording, not just a microphone in a rehearsal studio. where you could kind of roll with that. You know, you go, well, I can't hear the singer. Well, you know, so what? It's just a recording of a band in a rehearsal studio. Trying to make it sound real. Well, what tools do I have when I got just a stereo mix? Well, I thought, well, one thing I could do is I could duplicate the stereo. So now I have just a duplicated stereo channels. I could run that through an MS processor, try to pull back the sides, try to push up the center, yeah, and then push that and then EQ it, like put a high pass filter in there so there's no low end in there, and maybe EQ it for her voice specifically, almost treat it like a vocal channel, and just nudge that up a couple of dB into the stereo mix, the original stereo mix, while she's singing or during these quiet sections. And so I automated a move that during those very, very quiet sections where she's up against the mic, I would push that up there a little bit, you know, and I got a couple of dB out of it. So I was able to get her voice up where I felt it was acceptable, and that was how I did it. That same MS approach I will use on the aux send to reverb. So again, because usually the reverb that I might apply to one of these projects is really for the voice. Yeah, because the band's in the room, the amplifiers are usually 7 to 8 feet away from the microphone. The room is adding a lot of ambience to it. So the instruments already have ambience on it. If a guitar player wanted delay or more reverb, they're dialing that in on their amps, right? Well, I can't always just have a dry vocal, because in a formal, you know, multi-track recording, you would add a little reverb oftentimes or delay to that vocal. Well, how do I do that? Well, from the aux send, from the stereo mix, that goes to an MS, pull in the sides, push up the middle, fire that into reverb with some EQ again applied to focus on that vocal. And so that's how I always add reverb to the vocal on my one mic.
Now, you and I, we did 2 acts the day that we worked up at a barn in Sonoma.
Yeah.
And one of those acts was Cole Panther.
Yes.
Now that, we didn't use the R88. We used, I believe it was an A440 or a variation of the 44. And that, so mono mic.
Yeah.
And that, the stereo one sounds great too, but that mono thing sounds stunning.
Yes. I knew that was a great sounding microphone just because, well, that's what people said. But I had never used one before, particularly in that I used it for guitar once. I don't think I ever used it for a vocal. So it was like my first experience of using that 44, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I was blown away by how good that microphone sounds. And honestly, one of my motivations for using just literally one microphone for that recording was one of the comments I always get. And you know where I'm headed with this.
I know exactly.
It's like, well, I don't know why you call this thing a one mic, because it's actually 2 mics. So why do you keep calling it a one mic? You can't do stereo recordings with one microphone. And it's like, oh man, really? You're gonna bust my balls over that? I said, listen, my explanation is when I send my assistant to the mic locker to get a stereo mic, I don't ask them to go get the stereo mics.
Right.
I say, go get me the stereo microphone. Right. So it's always considered one microphone. It's a stereo microphone, but it's one microphone, okay?
And if you go, to your pro audio retailer and you purchase it, it counts as one.
Yeah.
You're not being charged 2 times.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I had never, ever thought about that at all. I probably did 5 or 6 of these recordings and posted them to the world. And then the comments started coming in. That was like one of the first ones, just some guy trolling me about, well, he keeps calling this one mic, but it's actually a stereo mic. So, he's being a little dishonest or whatever. It's like, so when I knew I was going to do Cole Panther and I knew what his setup was going to be, I thought, this might be a good opportunity to show those people that I can do this with one mic too, and this will be the one mic that they can listen to, that you know, I'm not lying about. It's actually one mic. Okay.
Right.
The artist and his acoustic guitar are on one side of the microphone, and the double bass player and the pedal steel player are on the other side of the microphone. And we arrange them in the room to get a good balance, and that's what you hear. In fact, why don't we start showing people some of this stuff? Why don't we start with that one?
With Cold Panther?
Yeah, because let's start with one mic.
We'll take a look at that now.
Sitting at a red light, watching a junk bird pecking on a tree. Mama smiling on my daddy, and I feel a rush coming over me. We're going downtown.
So in that particular case, John and I were hidden away in a back room, and the band was out in the main part of the barn.
Yeah.
I'm stunned once again. Just Cole's voice is just so moving to me when I watch that, and when I play that for people, is like, oh, you want to check something out?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about placement and how you arrived at what works and what doesn't work. Because I noticed when we were setting up for one of the recordings with the stereo mic, with the R88, you were being very precise. You were measuring, and you had the angles and the distances, and it was interesting to watch you work. And it was clear to me, I was like, well, he's done a few of these. Clearly, he has a strategy. Right. How did you arrive at what works and what doesn't? I mean, besides trial and error.
It's funny, the very first recording, which we spoke about earlier, I sort of like roughed it out. I'm not sure if I even used a tape measure at the time, you know, where I placed the guitar amplifiers. But that was, that very first recording was so successful that I kind of used it as a model going forward. In other words, you know, it's like anything we do as recording engineers. If it works, you keep it. You keep that in your toolbox.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, you kind of remember not to do that again. It kind of evolved from the very first recording. So when I went to do the second recording with the same band, I started with that approach. Usually there's two electric guitar players in a lot of what I do. There's usually two people playing electric instruments. It could be a keyboard player and a guitar amp. So I want those like in a stereo mix, one on one side and one on the other. Maybe not out to the extreme far left and right, maybe so, I don't know, but maybe somewhere kind of tucked out of the way of the center. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
The setup for that is I use combo amps. I can't use a, you know, double stack Marshall or something. That would be asking for trouble. But usually combo amps, and I set them on a stool to get them up, because one of the things about the AEA R88 ribbon microphone that has stacked ribbons, if the bottom ribbon sees the signal louder than the top ribbon, then it will pull to one side or the other, because one side does sort of, the bottom one represents either the left or the right, and the top one either represents would represent the opposite, right? So if you have a combo amp and you put it on the floor, the ribbon microphone that's up at vocal height, right? Because if I have a vocalist, it's got to be at their height. So that's kind of what dictates where the microphone's going to be on the vertical plane. Mm-hmm. If I have a combo amp on the floor, even if I have it panned to the right, if that microphone's capsule or ribbon, if the left channel is on the bottom ribbon, it's going to pull it towards the center. I don't want to get too into the weeds with this, but you can see how it's necessary to get a good stereo image to have everything up as close to the center line, the horizontal center line of the two ribbons as possible. Now, I've never found a stool that was 5 feet high, to put an amp on to get it absolutely perfect. But a normal bar stool seems to work pretty well. So I've always used bar stools. At 25th Street, they had a pair. When I go out of town, I literally have to go buy a pair because I can't always assume a studio will have them. And if they do, they may not even be matched. One might be high and one might be low. So like when I went to Muscle Shoals and I went to Memphis to Sun Studio, I had to go to Kmart and buy a pair of stools on the way to the session because I had to have those there, and they're still there. I left them there.
There's so many variables here because what if the singer wants to sit?
I've had singers want to sit, and that's fine. I'll just lower the microphone down to their level. That's better actually if you've got combo amps on bar stools. That gets it even closer, so that's kind of a good thing. So there's that. So I might have a singer in front of the mic. Sometimes they're playing an instrument or not.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a guitar, if they're playing electric guitar, that electric guitar would go out to one of the amps that would be on the right or the left. If they're playing acoustic guitar, most of the time, the acoustic energy of the guitar itself is loud enough for the center vocal mic. We have enough of it. Sometimes we might go electric with it. If it's an acoustic guitar and it has a pickup, we might just run it to an amp to get the volume up. Then I usually have, the drummer usually sits on one side or the other of the stereo field. It kind of depends on the room and the it's a bit of an ergonomic thing in the room because I have video I'm constantly being aware of, and I have my video guy saying, well, you don't want to put them there. Yeah, there's a lot of considerations once you start plugging video into this equation.
Many, many years ago in Portland, I did an experimental recording with a band. We were at the end of a record. It was kind of a similar thing. I said, hey, why don't we do this acoustic number outside with a couple stereo mics, and we kind of made a little contraption for those mics. And I was in the basement yelling out, guitar player, move to the left. And essentially what I got out of that experience, it's like posing for a picture.
Mm-hmm.
Posing the band for a sonic picture. And ultimately that is what you are doing.
That's a really good way. I never thought of that, but that's really a good way of putting it, Matt. It's like composing a portrait.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I mentioned earlier how I'll always put the bass amp, usually, again, a smaller bass amp. Please bring a small bass amp. And I put it near the kick drum because the kick drum and bass traditionally have to be balanced, so I do that. So I pretty much do that the same way every time. Then the guitars or amps are always out to the side, anything acoustic in the middle. If there's no background singer, I might use the close center for something else, like a keyboard. Like I might put if there's somebody playing like a Rhodes piano, or in one case I had a Leslie organ, B3 with a Leslie speaker. I put that in the center, out about 8 feet from the back side of the microphone, and then the two amps on either side of that. It kind of depends on what the instrumentation is how I'll go about arranging it. Sometimes I get stumped because the instrumentation isn't balanced in a sense that, oftentimes, like if we have like a electric guitar and like say a Rhodes piano, well, would I put the Rhodes piano on one side, electric guitar on the other? Well, you could, but that can often create kind of, because sonically they're so different sounding, that one side could dominate the other. So typically something like that in a multi-track recording, we might go, well, let's take the Rhodes piano, let's put it through a chorus, or let's do something to make it more stereo and put it in the middle with a sort of a stereo effect, and then maybe put the guitar on one side and double it, put it on the other, to help kind of balance the stereo field. Well, those are great things to do when you're doing a multi-track recording and you're trying to paint with all these instruments, with all this color, and you have all this creative freedom. But when a band walks into a studio and this is their instruments, this is what they have, you have to like think on your feet how you're going to like get this thing balanced to sound like a multi-track recording. Because I don't get to double anything. There's no overdubs.
Yeah.
These are my rules. You know, the band has to perform the song in one complete take.
Yeah.
I do no edits. The videographer has basically the same rules apply to him. He has to get his shot, one person perspective, one camera. He does basically a ballet around the performers, like it would be, and you're probably familiar with this as being a tracking engineer. Oftentimes the band is out there maybe rehearsing or practicing, and you're walking around the room, taking a look at positions. You know, is the microphone been moved? Is everything where it's supposed to be? And you're walking around the room while they're performing. I kind of wanted my videos to be just that, a one-person perspective of what it's like to be in the studio while this performance is taking place. Don't be in the way.
Right.
You know, don't be in people's face. You know, but move around the room and observe what's going on.
It's a very voyeuristic perspective of the ones that I've seen.
Yeah.
And just for clarity's sake, you know, I know this, but in case the audience doesn't know, it's a continuous shot.
Yes.
And that's why there can't be any edits to
Right.
any of the audio, because it's a continuous video shot.
Yes. You know, we were talking earlier about people's comments.
Yeah.
You know, some of the comments is like, why are you just using one camera? Why aren't you using like 3 cameras? So when the guy plays his guitar solo, you know, we can see his face. It's like, you know.
It's interesting because what you're doing is you're creating art, yes, and you're creating you're documenting something that is happening in real time, and it's funny to see comments like that because it's like, just enjoy it. Don't try to control it.
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid of both studio recording and a live performance, a live recording. The problem with live recordings now is nobody believes they're live.
Right.
I mean, most people in our industry knows that most live recordings, you know, they fix stuff.
Which
they do overdubs.
Right, and I think that we could even go back to, I think, Kiss, admittedly, you know, on Kiss Alive, that was an augmented live recording from what I understand.
Yeah, I think once they started doing multi-track live recordings, that's what happened. Somebody goes, wow, I played the wrong note, can I fix it? And it started with that, and then it probably got even more severe where complete performances were replaced. Multi-track recording and record making is a magical thing that doesn't have to play by any rules, and the art that it creates, there's always validity to it, right? It doesn't have to correspond to, well, it has to be live or anything. There's really no rules to it. So I'm not trying to tell people that this is the best way to go about doing anything.
Right.
I'm just saying this is just another way of capturing what your band is doing or what your artist is doing that has literally been lost since the age of multi-track recording.
Well, essentially what you're doing is almost capturing a stage play.
Yes.
If we use movies and theater productions, you're in essence working on a theater production because it's all happening right then and there.
Yeah.
And there's no undo or do-over.
That's right. Yeah.
And the presentation is a different presentation.
That's right. And when you go and see a stage presentation, it's a very different experience than going to see in a film.
He gets drunk reading the Bible. She gets high sniffing cocaine. We all got a religion. It don't have to look the same. We could build a wall between us. You could build a Chevrolet. You could be a saint and never catch a break. You could work outside.
Well, we should explain why you and I did a one mic together.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, it was pretty straight ahead. You just called me and said, "Hey, you wanna join me on a one mic thing in Sonoma at a barn?" And I was like, "You had me at one mic,
Right.
You know, I'm in."
It was a remote recording, and I do not own any equipment for remote recording. And I thought, well, who do I know? And I thought, well, Matt has that stuff.
I'll call him.
I'll call Matt. and I know that you've been a fan of the one mic stuff, so I figured, it might be fun for you to come hang anyway.
Oh, it was immensely educational and enjoyable.
Yeah.
And for me, it raises a lot of questions and about production and considerations for production.
Well, why don't we show them, 30 seconds of Ismay.
Let's take a look at that. Okay, so that's interesting to see that again, because what I'm curious about is how you arrived at putting the bass amp in front of the kick drum. Why is the bass amp not behind the drummer? Obviously the bass would cause the snare to rattle probably a little more, but other than that, how did you arrive at bass amp in front of the kick drum?
The amplifier itself needed to be near the bass player. So if I put it behind the drummer, he wouldn't have access to it, or she. So I think it was mostly for convenience. It was mostly for people to see it.
Right.
Because I need people to see that this guy is playing in an amp.
Right. Oh, that it's not a DI.
DI.
Right.
Exactly. Plus, a kick drum, when you're 8 or 10 feet away from a microphone, is pretty omnidirectional. So placing a combo amp in front of the kick drum doesn't really affect the sound at all. So I wasn't too concerned about that. But kind of getting back to what I was saying earlier about things that are on the floor and how they will pull to one side, that was an early consideration about kick drums. Will they always just appear on the left side because the capsule, or not the capsule, but the bottom ribbon of that microphone is at it pulls to the left because it's the left channel.
Right, because they're stacked in the R88.
Yeah.
There is, unlike, I think in most cases, I'm not sure if there's stereo ribbon mics out there where they're not stacked.
No, they have to be stacked, yeah. Yeah, so the bottom ribbon is going to tend to pull to one side or the other if you're not hitting it right between the two ribbons. So I thought, oh man, this is going to be a mess. So what I figured out how to do that was I would set up the kick drum, the drums in the room where I think they need to be, and I have to, of course, talk to my video guy about the lighting and all this stuff. Put it where I think I want it to be. Then I put the mic about as far away as I can get it, where the room just doesn't spoil the sound, get it maybe closer. And then I have them kick it, and then I twist the mic, because one side of the room is going to be probably a little more bassy than the other. Then I'll twist the mic back and forth until it feels like the drum is in the center. And that is a mixture of the kick drum being on the floor, hitting the bottom ribbon sooner, and the ambience of the room, that marriage. And so I'll move it around back and forth until the meters on the console or on my mic pre's got that thing pretty close to the middle. None of them are dead center, none of them, but close enough. And then I have them hit the snare, and I go, well, where's that going to land? And oftentimes it's okay. Sometimes it's not, and we have to make some more adjustments. So That's been often problematic. And again, it kind of depends on the room. The video we just showed, the Ismay in the barn, that's a very ambient recording.
It is. Well, that barn was pretty big.
Yeah, yeah. That's about as ambient as I'm ever going to want to get. When the room is really active, acoustically,
Yeah.
it has a lot of say on the presentation of the drums. It just will.
Which we were kind of alluding to earlier with, tempo of the song coupled with the acoustics of the room.
Right. I don't want to get so unconventional with this thing where it stops sounding like a modern multi-track recording. Mm-hmm. I would say that a lot of these recordings sound like a multi-track recording. I think that any person off the street, if you played them any of these one mic recordings, they wouldn't immediately think, oh, that's definitely done with one microphone. I don't think anybody would think that. Because the drums tend to be more ambient, I would say that if it was a multi-track recording and the drums were that ambient, I would say, well, the producer or the band, that's their thing. They want, that's something that they actually wanted in the production. That's just something I have to live with.
Yeah.
The process isn't perfect. I can't get that in-your-face immediate drum sound and then have a singer and everything else balanced. I can't really do that. So the one mic recordings, even though many would argue, and I would argue that they do sound like multi-track recordings, the drums tend to be pretty ambient.
Because they have to be.
It's the nature of the recording. Having said that, if you put it in a super dry environment, like I did at Muscle Shoals, mm-hmm. That's a very, very dead 70s style recording environment. You don't have big boomy sort of ambient drum sound. It's pretty damn tight. Maybe we could show the video of the Imaginaries at Muscle Shoals. That's a very tight environment. Mm-hmm. And you can hear a bit of the reverb that I've added to the voice. So you might want to check that out.
Let's do that now.
Lately, I've been thinking about you and every little thing you do that makes me smile. Believe me, across my heart I swear, you are an answered prayer, shining light. I'm counting down the hours till I see you soon.
There's a lot of pre-production, though, that goes into this, right? Because before you actually show up to the space you're going to record, I assume that you visit the band in a rehearsal space or have some Zoom conversations with those who are in other states and explain the process, right?
Well, originally, the first set of recordings I did, maybe the first 10 acts I worked with, were all acts I'd worked with previously in a multi-track environment. These are all Bay Area recording artists. So I knew them. And once I made a couple of these, I could show the videos to the artist and they would kind of understand what they were buying into,
Yeah.
And, all of them were excited to do it and stuff. So I already knew that these artists were capable of, performing a song from top to bottom without an edit. I was confident that they could do that. So there wasn't really much vetting going on with that. However, when I decided that I wanted to kind of push the envelope with this and get out of my comfort zone, comfort zone meaning working in a really, really nice sounding studio that's very well controlled with artists I knew and would kind of put up with me and that I was confident could perform. I decided I wanted to go out of town and go to maybe a couple of places, historic recording studios and try it there with artists I had never worked with before. And I thought, well, this was really, I was really going to stick my neck out on this thing. You know, with multi-track recordings and now with Pro Tools, engineers, we're not sticking our neck out too much anymore. You know, drive into the studio. I used to be nervous. I used to be scared because I wasn't really completely comfortable and confident with what I was doing. I was kind of new at it, and things were coming at me that maybe I couldn't completely control or understand, and I really wanted it right. I was trying to develop a, you know, career and a reputation, and all this stuff was super important to me, and I was a nervous frickin' wreck. And then over the years, that just went away. And then I started noticing that when I started doing these one mic recordings, that it kind of came back, and I kind of liked it. I kind of liked the idea that whatever we were going to do today, I wasn't confident that it was going to turn out. And I might even get embarrassed by it. You know, what if the band comes in and listens to it and goes, that's terrible.
Right.
We don't sound like that. Can we just set up some more mics? You know, and every act I brought in, even though they might have been friends of mine or past clients that I believed in, there's always some guy in the band who's going to go, you know, that's not my snare sound. Fortunately, maybe just out of respect for me, nobody confronted me with that kind of thing. So, but hey, you want to go out of town? You want to work in some studios you've never worked in before, with bands you've never worked with before? Let's see how that goes.
In a format
Yeah.
that is foreign to most people in this day and age.
Right. Even in a multi-track setup, I would have been a bit like, I hope this goes okay.
Right.
So I wanted to stick my neck out and really test the theory. I'd sort of proven the concept at 25th Street with maybe 8 or 10 acts, you know, kind of building up my repertoire of, you know, how to go about it, and videos and stuff that I've compiled.
Yeah.
But what would it be like if I walked into Muscle Shoals in a dead room where I don't know the people, it's in the South?
But haven't your previous videos that you have had success with, I would assume that those help pave the way for you.
Yes.
Because you show a band that, they're
Yeah.
going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
let's do this.
Yeah, I don't think any of the artists I worked with in the South would have agreed to do it if they hadn't seen the previous videos. Or they would have said, yeah, fine, what do you want to pay us for that? Right?
Right.
You know?
Because when you see it, it tells you everything. Oh, this is what we're doing. Okay, let's sign up.
Right. There's a couple of ways I had to go about vetting the artist. Okay. So the first thing was, I knew I wanted to work at Muscle Shoals because the room was dead. I figured I wouldn't get into too much acoustic problems. And it's historic, and I thought it would make for great video. Plus the fact that I wanted to show the room. My videographer just had to light the whole room. We didn't have to get into, you know, specific lighting effects and drama and stuff like we've done on some of our previous videos. You know, where I try to make each band look different. I'm trying to make something that's entertaining, not just a you know, clinical view of a band in a room recording. That's kind of boring.
Yeah, you're not plugging everybody into a preset of any type, because each one of these looks different.
Yeah.
And sonically sounds different.
Yeah, I go out of my way to make them look and sound different. So at Muscle Shoals, you know, the ceiling's low, so, you know, we had problems with trying to get the place lit properly and blah, blah, blah. So the vetting process required I see a video of them performing live. Didn't need to be anything fancy. I just needed to take a look at them and hear if they can play a song from the top to the bottom. That was the criteria, really. And I wanted to hear their previous album or albums if they have more than one, and I wanted to be able to pick the songs. That was the other thing. Oftentimes that wasn't a problem because with all these acts, there's usually 1 or 2 songs that are really outstanding. You know, so they were usually pretty obvious. what those songs were. So that was never a problem. But I would say, I really like this song and I really like that song because I think they would lend themselves to the process. I'm not going to take your 6-minute song where there's 5 guitar solos. For my purposes, I don't think that that's something people are going to want to sit through.
Something else that I don't think people are aware of is you pay for everything.
Yes.
The bands aren't paying for the studio time. You are.
That's right. This is what some people would call a pet project. I'm not going to call it a vanity project because I hate that because I'm not in it, really. So it's not really my vanity. It's a proof of concept. I felt that maybe if I could prove to, our community that this was a viable medium, I mean, not just the audio, but the video together, that maybe people would want to hire me to do something similar for them. I've done really well with my engineering and mixing and mastering career. I have disposable income, if you will. Some people might buy a car with it. Some people might, put a swimming pool in.
Or buy a boat.
Or travel.
Sure.
There's ways that people choose to spend their money, and it's all good. Well, there's a couple of things. I wanted to kind of relive the excitement of recording, the thing that really kind of got me into the business originally. I started as a live sound engineer, and there was a certain amount of angst and anxiety to that, and excitement.
Yeah.
To getting it right the first time. I thought that I missed that in my life. I gravitate to singer-songwriters, big productions that take months to accomplish, multi-track recording, Pro Tools editing has kind of worn me out.
Yeah.
I'm 75, and I started when I was 20 years old making records. So I've gone from, I've seen it all, literally. And I just thought I was at a stage of my life where I wanted to give back, if you will. The musicians and artists that I choose to do this with, they deserve the attention. They deserve my attention. And I want to, help them some way. And I think that this is a great medium to expose them to the world, their music, their songwriting, their singing, whatever it may be, in a way that is different. It's different. If you're a modern singer-songwriter and you say, hey, I need a video, typically what you would do is you'd go to a recording studio. Some might be daring enough to do a multi-camera live recording, and then of course, edit it later, make comps.
Sure.
That would typically kind of be how people would do it, or worse, they might go in and do a lip sync.
Right.
To the record that they spent 6 weeks working on, and auto-tuning and cutting the drums to the grid and all the hard work they put into it. We'll just go. We can't play that live. Let's just go in and do a lip sync to it and have some fancy video techniques and effects running. I mean, that's kind of like how a lot of people do this stuff. Or they're making little TikTok videos with an acoustic guitar in their kitchen that goes for 45 seconds to a minute or something like that. So it's kind of like the two extremes.
Right.
Either overproduced and kind of like valueless because it's been done so much.
Right.
Do we really need to see a band pretend like they're playing their songs in a studio? Do we really need to see that again?
When the whole MTV Unplugged thing happened, that was kind of like one end of it. And then, the full-blown concert or record was the other end of it.
Yeah.
This is almost a marrying of the two.
Yeah. Well, Matt, it is in many ways like an MTV Unplugged, which went away for some unknown reason. I don't know if it's because artists just decided, well, we can't do that. We need this, we need that, we need auto. I don't know what it is that prevented people from abandoning that way to showcase their, music. I mean, did Nirvana's MTV Unplugged take anything away from their records or the record making?
No, it didn't.
Not at all.
I think
it maybe even enhanced it.
But I also think the difference too in that time period of the 90s, and I could be radically wrong about this, but I feel like there were more bands in that time period. And now we have more solo artists.
Yeah.
And the accompanying musicians.
Yes.
As opposed to the multiple personalities of a Nirvana, an Alice in Chains, a Pearl Jam, a Kiss, all the different people that did that whole Unplugged thing.
Yeah.
I would also say that the Tiny Desk on NPR is almost a cousin to the One Mic.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's more than one mic in that situation.
Yeah.
It's a cousin to the Unplugged, the Tiny Desk, and what all those have in common is an honesty, an organicness. Now, what I wanted to ask you about was this, is like, if the average person sees that, I don't know if they can put two and two together and understand the significance of it as musicians and audio professionals can. Because audio professionals see it and go, holy crap, that's amazing. Musicians see it and say, holy crap, those guys can play. That's a great song. And look at this as a different way of doing things. Right. But the other thing also about this is, I'm sure that if you are a band that's gone through that experience with you, I'm sure it changes your perspective on the recording process a bit. And I'm sure it's changed your view on the recording process, even in a multi-track environment, because you might have taken the lessons that, after doing a number of one mics, the next multi-track project you go into, I'm assuming that you look at it slightly differently than you did before.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because the one mic derived from the multi-track, so it was always there.
Right.
I always encouraged the bands I've worked with to cut this stuff live. When I first started becoming, a professional recording engineer, sometime in the 80s, early 80s, I was working with bands that were essentially live acts that came into a studio and cut an album in a week. And most of that stuff was live. And it was, of course, the analog tape. Dead Kennedy is a perfect example. That was a very fine-tuned stage act. And the recordings were nothing more than documentations of their stage act. Mm-hmm. Of course, as I did more and more albums with them, they became more self-indulgent, and multi-track techniques and effects and time and overdubs and stuff became more, to the forefront, mostly because they don't want to make the same record over and over again and they want to experiment. So the one mic was a return to the thing I loved the most. If I go back in now and do a multi-track recording with a band, those sensibilities I still have those.
Yeah.
So the one mic was born out of the multi-track, the frustration of multi-track recording, I wouldn't, I wouldn't make a singer go back out and sing a line to get a word in tune, 12 times. I would auto-tune it, I would just manually tune it.
Right.
I wouldn't do that, right? So there's some things about multi-track recording that are extremely convenient when you're, in the art of making records. In the art of making records, it's a kind of a different criteria. The criteria is to produce something that is never been done before, that no one's ever heard before, that's fun to listen to, that serves the song and showcases the talent of these people or person. That's really the goal, is to really bring the world something that's new and exciting to do. So whatever it takes, I'm all for that. I'm not going to say, no, you got to do it, 30 times in a row to get the perfect take. We might do it 10 times in a row, and then I might make a comp, just like everybody else does.
Right.
I wouldn't, And because studio time is so expensive now, you can't, it's really hard to, make that argument. Like, I'm going to keep you guys out there for another hour, or I can make a comp on those drums that'll take me 10 minutes. I got to think about that. Where do I want to spend my time and money?
Right.
You know?
The One Mic project just really, it takes away a lot of, it's like, as we said, it's like posing for a photo.
Yeah.
You got to, get everything right and get everybody to sign off right then and there. So you take out the mixing, there's a little post-production assembly as far as like maybe adding a little reverb, but it just seems like such a pleasant project to work on.
It is maybe my top 5 studio moments, where you just say to yourself, I am so privileged to have experienced what I just experienced in this room with these people.
Oh yeah.
There's those moments that are just magical.
Yeah.
I've had more of those doing these one mics than I've ever done with a multi-track. It's just there are just magical moments where, because they have to bring their A game.
Yeah.
There's no coming back tomorrow to repair your part because you weren't feeling it today.
Right.
There isn't any of that. People are kind of like, particularly after a couple of playbacks, it's very interesting. After the first couple of playbacks, people will go, yeah, what's that chord you're playing? They'll fine tune things that they probably missed at a rehearsal, and heaven forbid, maybe even at a gig, because now they're hearing it in an intimate way that is very revealing and vulnerable. And a lot of times they'll come in and go, oh, whoa, I need to think about this. I need to, let's adjust the tempo, and they really work on the presentation in a very different way than they would in a multitrack. Because a lot of times in a multitrack, you might go, well, this part isn't quite, I'll go home tonight and I'll work on it. And when I come back on Saturday, I'll nail it.
Right.
So nobody ever knows what the effing record sounds like until when the guy mixes it.
As you said before, it really, it brings all of the control back to the musician and tells them, oh, okay, here's what I need to do to make this work. And then they can instantly hear the result and discover, oh yeah, all right, I like that. That does work.
Yeah, they fine tune it on the fly, and everyone's goal, and this is organic. I don't say this to them. This is an organic feature of this, is that they do what is ever necessary to make the song work.
Yeah.
Not my part work, They're not self-conscious about their particular part. They're more concerned about the overall presentation of the final effect. That's a beautiful thing, man. I mean, when you finally get in a room with a group of very talented musicians who all suddenly come to that conclusion together, it's effing magic.
The other thing that's great about it too is that it makes the recording process far more invisible, because it's not a studio full of mic stands and mics everywhere and talk back and headphones per se, although headphones could be worn if they want, but essentially it's this single capture device and it's all up to them.
It is up to them. Oftentimes on playbacks, I'll leave the room. And then I'll go out in the studio and I'll just look through the glass and look at their faces and sort of try to, particularly on the first one. The first one is always the most scary one for me, because I don't know how people are going to take to it, because honestly, it probably doesn't sound like anything they've ever done, because they've only done multi-track recordings. They walk into a studio, guy puts microphones on all their stuff, and all goes to separate tracks, and somebody mixes it, and that's that's how it's been for them. I'll tell you a kind of an interesting story. It was at Muscle Shoals, actually. In fact, it was the Imaginaries, the one I showed the video of. The Imaginaries is a duo, a couple. Very talented, very, very sweet people, very extremely good singers-songwriters. So to do the Muscle Shoals recording, they needed to hire session players. So who do they hire? They hire some of the A-list cats from the area, from Muscle Shoals area, Florence, Alabama. And so these guys come in, and I recognize a couple of these guys. Kevin Hawley, who is a phenomenal guitar player, session guitar player, and a keyboard player. I've seen him in videos, and the bass player, what's her name? Tanya, I think. She's in the Drive-By Truckers, bass player. And I'm thinking, wow, they got some like A-list session guys. And they all walk in and they see the one mic sitting there. They knew in advance that we were going to do this with one microphone, but I could tell that there was probably a lot of, how in the hell are you going to do that, going on? Like they're used to walking into the best studios in Nashville and proper engineers with proper microphones, recording everything professionally. That's their expectation, right?
Right.
So here they are, and they're in there, and they're kind of working up the songs. I don't think I'm not sure if they ever had a rehearsal or anything. They're A-list guys. You give them a card, give them some, chord charts, and one or two takes. We're good.
Yeah.
Those kind of guys. So we did a couple of takes. They're still kind of learning the songs, and we're having trouble with the lighting, and we do 3 or 4 takes, and I'm starting to get kind of nervous because it's a Hammond B3 player, 2 electric guitar players, bass, and 2 singers in a very small room. So in a room I've never worked in before, and the control room is like really small, and I mean, really small. So like I walked in there and I went, how in the hell did they make great records in this place? How did that even happen? You walk into the control room, the console's in front of you. At the time, they had a nice API there, but the back wall is right up against the back of your head. I mean, it's acoustic nightmare, I would call it.
Right.
But it's Muscle Shoals. I mean, how many amazing records came out of that place? Hundreds. So I'm thinking, well, I can't have an attitude about it. I got to make do with what I have here. Plus, it looks great. I mean, it really looks funky, and it looks like Muscle Shoals. So I'm pleased with the video, the look of the thing anyway. At some point, they're going to have to come in here and listen to this, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure about this. I'm just not sure about how this is sounding because I'm really unfamiliar with the control room, uncomfortable with it, in fact. In fact, I was using my headphones. I finally just put my headphones on and went, I can't deal with this. I got to make it right in the headphones. I thought, after like 6 takes, I said, yeah, that was a great take. Why don't you guys come in? And I went, God, I hope they like this. So I leave the control room. I had to because there just wasn't room. So they all crowd in there, and I go out in the studio, and I'm standing there with my videographer, Nathaniel, and I'm looking at him, and I said, well, how'd it go for you? And he goes, I don't know, man, the camera angles, the lighting, I'm trying to get around to get all these guys, blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, yeah, I don't know about the sound, man. This may be a throwaway. So they're in there, and I can see them talking to each other from behind the glass, and they're playing. Some of them are putting the headphones on and taking them off and listening to the speakers, and there's a conversation going on. The music stops. The conversation continues, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
I said, they're probably in there trying to figure out a nice way to tell me to like buzz off.
John, I think we're done for the day.
Yeah, that was great. Can we put up some more mics or something? So the guitar player comes out. He's the first one out of the control room. He comes out and he walks right up to me and he looks at me and he says, hey, I don't know what the hell you're doing here, but this is some sort of like voodoo magic stuff, man. It's amazing. And I went, oh my God, thank you. That's like the nicest thing you could have ever said to me. Voodoo magic. And I went, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that as an endorsement.
Yeah.
I took a breath and I went, okay, even though I think it sounds pretty screwy right now in my headphones, I'm just gonna, you know what he was responding to? He was responding to what they did with that song as musicians and the performances of the singers. That's what he was responding to. He wasn't necessarily responding to the, sonic character, of it. And that's, that's really what I'm trying to do anyway.
you know, maybe that guitar player was used to hearing his amp in a particular way, and he felt like this was representational of him and not some, you know, cram through a couple, you know, a 57 and a 421 running through whatever, you know, kind of, maybe this was him.
I think the process produces this sort of organic, natural vibe in the room, in a way, in a natural way. You know, you mentioned earlier headphones. A lot of the artists don't choose to wear them, and I'm thinking, wow, that's wild, because if you put the headphones on, you actually hear the mix. You could like really kind of balance yourself better, you know, if you were actually hearing a mix. But then I realized later that, you know, it makes complete sense, because the balance of the instruments and the singers in the room gets so fine-tuned through the process that they don't need them.
So that leads me to the musical type, because it seems like you've leaned into, let's just say, singer-songwriters or pop, rock, Americana type acts. If we look at classical or jazz, do you think this process would lend itself to those types of music, that type of instrumentation, violins, or, you know, a upright bass, drums, and a xylophone or vibraphone or whatever?
Well, for me, for my one mic series, that is always coupled with video. See, one thing I want to point out is that I'm not making audiophile recordings. That was never my intention. Now, having said that, I've had a lot of people, more than you would think, come to me from like indie audiophile record people. Come to me and go, hey, we want to license your one mic recordings for our record label. And we want to put out a record of your one mic recordings, just as the audio. And I'm thinking, I've never imagined these as audiophile recordings, first of all. And I never wanted to try to appeal to the purist crowd. You know, their idea of an audiophile record is you take a couple of, you know, instrumentation microphones, you know, that are flat from 1 hertz to 50,000 hertz or something, you know, and put it on an acoustic piano in some sort of fancy stereo configuration, and record that, and then do nothing to it, and play it back at 192. Right. I mean, that's their idea of an audiophile record, and of course that's exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to do. So I thought, well, that's kind of weird that they would want that, because I think if you take the video away, you kind of lose half of what I'm trying to say.
Right. Do you think the audio holds up without the video?
Well, this is the thing, and this is what I've always told them. I said, my recordings are really to represent the video. The video and the video and the audio are a marriage. It's like breaking up the marriage. It's like Lucy and Desi. You don't, you know.
Right.
I've never pictured that. And I said, the audiophile guys, they can say, well, we'll promote it as one mic recordings. And I'm going, yeah, but your people want this purist approach. If they hear reverb that I've applied to it, they're going to freak out. It's not some kind of purist recording.
So what if you took the purist element out, and have you considered partnering with the artist to say, hey, let's put this out on, whether it's on streaming, on vinyl, on CD, is that a consideration?
You mean have artists asked for the one mic audio to be put on their records?
No, for you to release a one mic compilation.
None of them have asked me for that. Some of them have used the recordings on their records, but no, I've never, first of all, it's going to stop with me because I'm never going to do it.
Okay.
Because frankly, anybody who hears these recordings are going to treat them like every recording they've ever heard. In other words, when you hear it, they're going to take it at face value that it was they're just going to assume it's a multi-track recording. right? And they may even say, well, it's a multi-track recording, and it's not particularly a great one because it doesn't have all the nuance and control and design that's associated with modern recordings, right? It doesn't offer those things.
Right.
If I want to make that record, I got to do it in multi-track, and I got to spend 6 weeks on it. I can make that record. I've made those records.
Yeah.
Right? I can do that. But that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is presenting this artist in a studio environment where it's controlled, performing one of their songs from top to bottom with no edits, as honestly as possibly can be done. And that's where your appreciation has to come from. It has to come from the singer and the songwriter's innate talent, not my engineering prowess.
Well, it's nice though that you've set some kind of parameters around it to say, this is my goal. Here are the parameters.
Yeah.
You know, one take video, one take audio, and not, you know, jump the shark. You know, a Happy Days reference. If you're under a certain age, you won't get it. But you know, like when a mini series runs its course, you're like, oh my gosh, another episode. What are we gonna do this season?
Yeah.
You've taken it, you've kind of established it, and you're not going to try to exploit it in every way, shape, and form.
No, there is no. It's funny. I do have people come to me and want me to. I had a guy whose name I won't mention. He's a famous podcaster, and he wanted to.
Not me.
No. He wanted to bring me into a studio to do a one mic for as a demonstration of what I do. But he insisted on using more than one camera. And I said, no. I said, once people see camera edits, they're going to assume there's audio edits. And then once they assume there's audio edits, then what am I doing here?
Well, as another angle to this, do you think that one mic as a concept could be an economical way for a band to record music on their own, for example? Like
Absolutely.
In a band could, set up in a rehearsal room and get everybody placed, one mic, very simple setup. Most people have a 2-channel interface, and they could run with that idea.
Oh, absolutely. I think people could, take the concept of recording with a bloom line configuration, stereo ribbon mic, and there's more than just the RE88 available. There's probably 3 or 4 others out there, or you can take 2 ribbon microphones and use a mic stand and cobble together a stereo mic using 2 mics.
Mm-hmm.
And you could use that if you understand the stereo field phenomena of the front and the back of the microphone, and then of course the 90 on the sides that are dead zones.
Right.
If you understand it technically, you can make some really nice home recordings or rehearsal recordings that were pretty representative of whatever's going on in the room at the time. Better than just sticking up a stereo microphone or putting your phone up,
Right.
And recording that way. I think you could do it. It would take trial and error, and it would take some adjustment, but I think in that way it would be great. People could do that. I mean, but that's one of the questions I get is, well, that RE88 is a very expensive microphone. Can we do this with other microphones? And I tell them, there are other ribbon microphones out there that are not too expensive,
Mm-hmm.
and you could get 2 of them because you need 2 of them to do this. You can stack them with using mic stands and have at it. I haven't done it, so I can't really endorse that, but I think there's inexpensive ways to go about it. I've had some artists send me their videos and recordings that they've done that are really great. I mean, they kind of went down the same path I did. They put a mic up in a room and they got everybody around it and they started recording, realizing, whoa, that doesn't sound very good. And then they tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it. A couple of them wrote me emails and said, hey, we're having a problem with this or that, and I might make some suggestions to them, which I'm happy to do for anybody who wants to try this. And then, like 6 months will go by, and I get a video, and it's fantastic. It's every bit as good as anything I would have done.
I think that's super cool, and I'm sure it's rewarding for you to see people being inspired by what you're doing.
I am, and it's just, it's amazing that people are getting that level of inspiration out of it, that they'll go purchase one of these microphones and force all their bandmates around it to do something that on paper is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, if I came to you and I said, hey man, I got a business plan and this is what it is. We're going to start recording bands around one microphone. It's going to be great. We're going to make lots of money. No, but no one would,
I don't think anybody would believe you.
No, it's a labor of love for me. I haven't made as many in a while. I'm kind of onto a new thing. It's all in my head. I can't play or show you anything, but it's a similar project, but it's kind of like an expansion of it. Matt, I'm going to go to 8-track.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, and I'm going to go to analog.
Oh my gosh.
So my next project that's in my head, it hasn't become realized yet because, needless to say, there are some things that I need to overcome first. But ideally, what I want to be able to do is offer singer-songwriters and bands the opportunity to spend 3 hours. That's all you get, because back in the 60s, they were cranking out amazing records in 3 hours. Okay, they get to spend 3 hours with me and my 8-track, and we'll cut a song top to bottom, overdubs, whatever we can do on 8 tracks. We'll mix it together on the spot. You'll leave with a finished product.
I love it.
Hey, pretty much every record from, I don't know how far back you want to go. Let's say let's just arbitrarily say 1960 through 1970. That was pretty much the deal. You get 3 hours. You want to go double, you want to go 6, you want to do 2 songs, we can do that. You're well rehearsed. You get it done. Everybody's there, and you're out the door, and it's done. And those 45s would hit the market like a week later.
What I love about what you've done with one mic and what you're talking about doing with this 8-track thing is you're differentiating from the norm and trying stuff that, while it's in some degrees has been done before, but in this day and age, it's unheard of.
And that's kind of sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And in a way, I want to remind people that the way that you're being told to make a record today isn't the only way to do it.
Right.
And all you have to do is look back and see how it was done then, and take that and apply it to today's technology, In fact, when I was at Sun Studio, the engineer there said to me, he says, this is how Sam Phillips made records, the band on one side and the singer on the other. And I said, I guess I'm kind of doing the exact same thing Sam Phillips did, but I'm just using a newer microphone and I'm recording to digital. But everything else is the same. Yeah. The process was identical.
Yeah.
So there are things to learn. Go listen to some Motown records and ask yourself, are these good records or not? And if you say, yeah, these are really good records, they're fun to listen to, and man, the song is great, then I would say to you, well, you can make that record. Those things were done on 4 and 8-track recorders, and they were done in 3 hours. Trust me, they were done.
I love it because, once again, it puts the onus on the musician.
Yes.
And gets them to do their job and doesn't make it all about editing waveforms.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, I think that the first couple of trial recordings I do will probably have a lot to say about whether or not this is something I'm going to want to pursue or not.
Yeah.
So there'll be, again, a proof of concept about this, because I swear to God, The first guy that comes to me and says, "Hey, can we throw this thing to Pro Tools so I can redo my?" I'll throw him out.
Well, on that note, I look forward to seeing and hearing the results of that, and maybe we'll do a deep dive on that when that happens. But until then, thanks for spending the time and going into this. I think a lot of people are really curious about what it is you're doing with this, and thanks for taking almost 2 hours to talk about it.
It's been
great.
a while, yeah. Well, I mean, it's the subject is vast, isn't it? Because it deals with the past, it deals with the artistry of making records, it deals with a lot of psychology of record making.
Musicianship and acoustics and
then of course there's the whole entire technical side of it. And it's so funny because it's just 2 tracks. Why don't we end with Jackie Green?
Let's do that. Jackie Green. Thanks, John.
Another day is come and gone, and I can't figure what went wrong. Mockingbird is mocking me.